Well, hey there, and welcome to the Homer Hangout Live. Hope you're doing well. Hope you've had a good week. It is all about game design this week, so hope you're pretty excited for that. I am. I can assure you, it's going to be a good one this week. So let's jump into it. Good to see everybody in the chat here. What is up, Jilly? What is up, Ali? What is up, Top Arcade? What is up, Colette? What is up, Steen, Atto, Udall, Ennis? What is up, everybody? Good to see you here. Got quite a bit to cover today. As always, if you've got any questions, do get them in the chat. I will try my best to answer them towards the middle and towards the end today. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's going to be a good one. So before we get into things, before we get into most of the exciting things, did I say exciting? This is exciting too. This is our LinkedIn group. And if you haven't joined already, please come and join me over there. It's over 600 professionals in there now. So come and join us over there on the LinkedIn group. Link is in the description. I'm posting in there every week, finding all the tidbits throughout the industry, things that you will find interesting. I hope. Latest post there, you can see on the screen. Did a rundown of the top 100 US free games, and quite interesting stats that. And it kind of ties in a little bit with what we're going to talk about today, about how to become a better game designer and some techniques you can use to truly understand what you're building and why, most importantly, you're building what you're building. So like I said, get the questions in. If you have anything related to this subject, ideally, but there'll be a little bit of Q&A at the end. And of course, you can come and join me over on the Homer Community Discord server. A link to that is also in the description. Come and join me throughout the week where I'm sharing all sorts of goodness. And if you've got any questions about your submissions with Homer, or you want to find out more about potentially testing with Homer and publishing your game with us, do come and drop me a message over there. Okay, so like I alluded to, we are going to talk about the MDA Game Design Framework today. Now, we've spoken before on the ideation show with George about the framework we can use here. This goes slightly deeper and a slightly different angle to that, both completely relevant and shouldn't be exclusive to one another. Indeed, I highly recommend, if you haven't seen that, the ideation show with George, our expert here at Homer, go and check those out. There's plenty of videos and even a playlist on this channel. Or, of course, it's all categorized lovely for you inside the Academy, so head on over there and join us inside. But this here is, well, let's get into it. Before I get into it any further, I was going to say it was created back in 2004 by 3 game designers, so you can see on the screen here, all industry veterans now and highly respected. And it was their paper to try and essentially break down a framework of finding out what is fun within games. And it's pretty fascinating stuff. And I always think it's worth reminding ourselves about what we're trying to create and how can we categorize fun in a way that we're looking to achieve when we're building our games. Now, it's a vast subject. We're not going to be able to cover everything in one short session here, but I hope this will give you some ideas and help you start to think a little bit differently. I'm here to challenge you on a Friday when we do these streams to really try and get you thinking a little bit outside the box, a little bit more in depth instead of really focusing on the code all the time. So of course we need to code the games to make our visions come to life, but we also, I think a lot of the time as designers, we forget, we get lost, we get sidetracked and lose focus on what we're trying to create. So this framework, created back in the early 2000s here, was trying to formalize the game design. Their research is fascinating. Let's jump into things today. And I'm trying to tie this back into a mobile focus, which has been pretty difficult. It's kind of easy to find examples when we look to the PC and console market. But of course, we're trying to take the PC and console experiences onto our phones now as technology rises, and the market's demanding better games. And thus, we need to arm ourselves with everything that we can to try and make better experiences for our players. Even the simplest of games can take a lot of takeaways from this and adopt this formula to try and understand exactly what makes their games tick. So they split it down into 3 separate sections. And the first one is mechanics, which is not particularly anything groundbreaking, I'm sure you'll agree. But this is essentially, they bundle everything into the mechanics. So this is essentially the code of your game. Your controls, your game rules, your systems, every single thing that goes into the game is classed as a mechanic from this framework. So we have different explanations and definitions of mechanics, and they're very interchangeable, but for the purpose of this, going through their paper, that is what they're classing mechanics. They then go on to the second pillar, which is dynamics, and these are the direct consequences in response to when a mechanic is actioned. And I'll explain this a little bit more in depth in a moment. And let's just get the third one on the screen, which is the aesthetics. Now, when we think of aesthetics, we normally think of what does it look like. That's typically what most people would think, I would say. But it's not to be confused here. This is more to do with the emotional responses that your game is going to deliver on. So the mechanics is the systems and the rules. The dynamics are what happens as a result of the mechanics. And the aesthetics is the direct response to the dynamics in your game. Does that make sense? Let's go through this a little bit. And as the game designer, that's where you start. You start with the code, you create your systems and the game rules, you code it so when someone presses a button, the player jumps, for instance. And the aesthetic there could be it's fun to jump, or they jump over on a platform, or something along those lines. I'm basing it, keeping it really basic for the purpose of this for now, but that's the kind of gist here. Whereas your player will experience your game in the complete reverse. So they will see the aesthetics of the game, and then they will learn about the dynamics, and potentially they will learn the rules. So it's kind of reverse. And this is where it gets kind of curious to me, because this is where I want you to make sure you're not getting lost in what you're trying to build. Let's put this into some sort of practical thing, which I always find is easier to, a little bit more palatable, because it can get quite heavy when you dig into these things. But let's have a look at Attack Hole from Homer, of course. And for the basis of this, I'm just simplifying it down so we really can understand how this framework works, and of course, in turn, how it can help you. So we look at Attack Hole here. We have the mechanics here, of which there can be many, and combined with, but it is purest core form. You've got the player characteristics, which is what the player can do, the player controller of how it moves in the code, remember, and the rules of the game, all set out within the code, and that's the mechanics. Now, the dynamics here is what happens as a cause of the mechanics. So the player taps and holds on the screen and the player can move, and then the player consumes the bullets on this one. So it's exactly how the game works, and the fundamentals of how you've coded the game. So again, we can layer this up. This is just so basic, it's unbelievable. But you know, the mechanics there, I've written it on the screen there. You've got the progression bar, you've got the button, you've got the background. It's everything in the code, and the dynamics are what happens as a result of that code. Now, when we're talking about aesthetics, remember it's not so much the look and the feel, but that is part of the aesthetics. But in their framework here, it's the emotions that are evoked as a direct result of the dynamics. So here we're in a level inside Attack Hull, and the feelings that we're trying to deliver on, or the feelings we get when we play the game, are not all of course, but some. So we get a feeling of the collection and the drive to complete and collect them all, like Pokemon Go style. We get a feeling of growth and power as our player expands as part of the mechanic coded. We get a slight time sensitive sort of tension there. You know, we want to collect everything and do it all before the time runs out. And we also get the satisfaction of collecting all the stuff. So I hope this is making sense so far. Do give me a like if it's all following, if you're following along and this is all making sense. So the thing what I want to highlight here, and we'll stay on this slide for just a little while, is how when you're building your game, and I've taken Attack Hull because everyone should know that game, how some slight changes in the mechanics and the dynamics can drastically alter the outcome and the emotions your player will have. So if you're not familiar with the game, we have a time restriction on this. So what would happen here if that time limit wasn't on the screen, or we took the time mechanic out? We would definitely have a different game just by removing that one mechanic or one game rule that we put into the game. Making sense? So if we took the time restriction off, we wouldn't have any urgency. It would feel very different. It wouldn't matter so much that the player grew in size, because it would just take longer. And this is where I think it's super interesting. By just changing one little part can really change the aesthetics of your game. Keeping up so far? So what I want you to do now is, in your head, obviously, you can watch the rest of this, but if you're building a game right now, what is it that you want your player to feel when they're playing your game? And I think it's really important to remember this, because we all practically, will be inspired by other games, and we see one game doing well and we say, oh, we can make one of those. And often we see a lot in the store that there's a lot of clones out there, but why exactly do those ones not do so well when people just clone them? And typically it's because they don't really understand what makes the games tick under the bonnet, and they forget to really investigate this stuff. All right, makes sense? So, any questions throughout this, do let me know. But I want to try and go deliberately a little bit slower today, only because I think this is super important to remember the real crux of this framework and how you can adopt it for when you're building your game or you're thinking about your game ideas. Now, they set out 8 different types of aesthetics in this framework. Now, of course, there are literally hundreds that you can think of, but I'm going to list them out and we'll go through them a little bit today, just to give you the complete framework here, because it's really kind of subjective. There's a lot of hot takes on this, but to pull it into mobile, I think it's super important that we have a look at the framework in its entirety, and hopefully by the end of this you can start adopting this when you're looking at other games, thinking, what's making them do well? Why are they doing well? Not just because it's fun, but why is it fun, and how can we break that fun down? Make sense? All right, I'm just going to catch up with the chat real quick, just so I don't lose Why do people play clones? That is a great idea. I always hit that button. Well, this is it. So typically, when you make a clone, you're just making a particularly poor version of a very good, successful game because you don't really understand why. Now, there's various reasons on clones. I think that's a conversation for another day. But typically speaking, once the clones are never as good because they don't bring anything new to the table and they don't understand what makes them fun in the first place. All right, so let's go through the framework here on the aesthetics. And we'll start off with sensation, a sense of pleasure of visuals and sounds for mobile. And I put for mobile in there because we probably know there's a lot of console games where typically sound is way more of a pull factor and experience driven game sort of let me rephrase that. The sound and the soundtracks are way more impactful on a console game or a desktop game typically. So the music and graphics more for mobile, but it can be anything. So it's like your eyes, your ears, your smell. Obviously, no smell in video games, but all your senses. It's the sensory experience. Typically for mobile, it will be graphics, but of course you can put haptics within your game, which will lead to another dimension, if you like, for mobile. You get the rumble on the controllers as well, of course, for PC and console. But think of these as the reasons for people to play. So we have Sky Children of the Light here, massive game on Apple. Pretty sure it got Game of the Year award. I might be wrong there, but you can see it is a feast for the eyes. So very much an experience through the senses. That game has loads of different aesthetics in it, and we'll touch on mixing and matching and stuff at the end. But that is the first one that they have, sensation. Now, next up, we have fantasy. And again, typically on PC or console, this is way more apparent. So when you think of things like GTA, you're the fantasy of a dude or dudette running around and essentially, just open world being a gangster type thing. It's a very much a fantasy driven game, as are Final Fantasy VII, something like that. They transport you to another world. RPGs. I think this one is pretty self-explanatory. But for mobile, and I've got the Crazy Labs game there, Alien Invasion, which is really heavily space themed game. Very curious character in this, very nice indeed. But I nearly added something like the simulation game where, police cop simulator, where you take the role of a police officer, or you could be a cashier or a border patrol, or, the simulation ties into this as well. And I think it's super important to remember that. So pulling it back to mobile, you can be the owner of a juice bar and all this kind of stuff. So it's very relevant, this one, even though when you think of fantasy, you're thinking more Lord of the Rings rather than bus conductor, right? So that's the next one there, fantasy. Narrative, again, a lot of the audience here, I know you guys are more hyper casual, sort of hyper casual plus developers, but the story, we've gone over this in a few of the other streams, that it doesn't have to be wildly narrative driven. You can add certain parts to your game that will essentially add intrigue and drama without doing very much at all. Setting the scene and having a few splash screens here and there pop up to lead you along a very loose storyline can be very, very powerful indeed. So like a book or a movie, this taps into the what's coming next. When you take a side quest and you meet another character in a game, how does that influence the overall story, if at all? and that is narrative there. So check out The Trail by Congreve if you've not. That's a very narrative-driven game. Very cool indeed. Now, challenge is a super interesting one. So these are the parts that make up the aesthetics, remember, and the reasons for your players to play. Now, challenge is a massive one, and pretty obvious when we think about games. They all have some challenge in one shape or form, I would argue. But I want to make sure the distinction here between difficulty and challenge. It's more to do with letting the player overcome rather than making it more difficult. And weirdly enough, I put Candy Crush Soda here as the example, because what the match threes do to really illustrate this point is that they do challenge the player, but they rarely make it more difficult. They use the same mechanics over and over again in different levels, in different shape of levels. They don't actually make it more difficult. They just do give you different challenges. Is that making sense? Hope that's making sense. Just going to catch up on the chat real quick just to make sure. Very cool. All right. So yeah, I've just gone back again. That is so weird. Why does that do that? Okay, yeah. So challenges, not the same as difficult, but every game pretty much will challenge the player, and that's where you can go into sort of flow states and things like that, where if it's not challenging enough it gets boring. If it's too difficult, people will bail, and we'll cover that flow state on another hangout here on a Friday at a different time. But I think it's important to get that definition there, the distinction between challenge and difficulty. So reasons to play: sensation, how does it look? Fantasy, do I get transported? Narrative, is it a compelling story? Challenge, how challenging is the game? Now, Fellowship is a interesting one as well, because it's more into the social aspect of mobile gaming, something that is certainly outside of the solo developer, I would like to say. So sorry, but typically the social aspects take a lot of resources to pull off. I put Monopoly Go in here because they have a really nice integration of social playing. But this is where teams or your teams or groups will come together and be a big part of the actual game for people to connect and stuff like that. Clans in Clash of Clans, that kind of facility to be social. Again, I would argue that this is more online or desktop PC / console games do this better as a much bigger social aspect. But of course, we can add leaderboards and stuff like that to have it almost fake social, but it doesn't. I don't feel this one is hugely relevant for mobile for me. Next up is discovery, exploration, player agency, and also rules for mastery. So discovery is a really smart one. Journeys on here as well, which actually has a massive social aspect to it as well. But this is where the players like to explore and uncover all the secrets and all of that kind of stuff. Very in tune with a lot of Dr. Bartle's audience type framework that we've spoken about before here. Again, check out that video for that one. But it leans into the exploration of new territories and stuff like that. But it can also mean exploring the game rules. So if you have player upgrades or skill trees and stuff like that, it also has that kind of aspect to it where you can start to explore the game's rules itself. So not exclusive to each other, but you can learn the game on a deeper level to become a master of it or learn tricks or hacks to the games. that kind of thing. So that's another reason to play. Expression and creative personalization, and I've chucked building in there for good measure because I think that fits well with this for mobile. Say Games home design as the Decoy Life as the example I've pulled. Very smart game, beautifully animated, but it allows for the personalization. It gets people feel creative. They want to personalize their character to drive a stronger bond between them and the game. I think this one is pretty self-explanatory, but a very, very massive one here. Again, seen a lot in the simulation games where you can design your own insert object here and keep them in a trophy room, and it's a form of expression and form of creativity. And last up, hi Guanti, you are late, but we'll let you off, is submission. And there was, in my research, there was a better word for this, but I'm going to keep it as submission to keep relatively true to the original MDA here. And this is really pastime or hobby. And I think I definitely fall into this one for sure, where we all have busy lives, and at the end of the day, sometimes you don't want to go on a mad gaming session. You just want to chuck something on and essentially zone out here. That is a pull for me on a lot of these games. So I mentioned a few times I don't mind grinding away, and I'll often load up some random game and just grind there for no reason whatsoever. And often I don't even realize why I'm doing it. There's just no particularly good reason, but for some reason it's satisfying and relaxing for me to just grind away and not get into anything too particular at all. So pastimes and hobbies, I'll put farming and grinding because I think they fit well for the mobile space. And we've got free plays. Stonegrass here, which is a particularly nice one, I have to say. So there's nothing really taxing on your brain here. It's just really a repetitive grind. The farming games like Farmville, if that's still going, the simulation games, tons of them, just to zone out. So on your screen now are the aesthetics that have been covered within the MDA. Touching on 20 years old at this point. Sensation, fantasy, narrative, challenge, fellowship, discovery, expression, and submission. And that is their 8 aesthetics here defining fun, which I think is kind of amazing, really. It's very difficult and challenging, but this is by no means exhaustive. There's stuff like competition, and a few others that I haven't really thoroughly thought through, but I'm sure you could add a few here. Collection could also be one in there. The completionism and all of that kind of stuff. So how are we doing in the chat? All making sense so far. So that's how they're defining fun. So let's pull this back around and that's all very great. That's great, Kevin. Thanks for that. How the hell does this help me? Well, this is where I think it's powerful as a game designer to use this framework. And this is how we can take some action, right? So they have this down as mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics, which is fine. But I think it's probably easier if we think about it of systems, actions, and feelings. So if we are approaching this from the player's point of view, which I believe is a really good way of doing this, we're thinking end game rather than opening up an engine of our choice to code it, right? So what is it that we are trying to make the player feel when we're going to start their game? So I would love to, while we're looking here, if you've got a game or a type of game, chuck it in the chat and we can try, as long as we all know it, it might be interesting to see if we can identify some of the games and why they are so successful, and can we guess what the designers were potentially going for? So if we think about this as systems, actions, and feelings, what are the rules and systems that will facilitate the dynamics? What are the actions here? How are we going to deliver the feeling of our desired aesthetic? And what are the reasons to play? And what are the 1 to 3 core aesthetics to focus on? What is our rules and systems? What are the actions that we can build or for the player to take to get the feeling that we want to make them feel? Okay, make sense? So, understanding your game's vision from the start and staying true to that throughout the life cycle of your game is super, super important. It's as simple as that. If I'm doing a relaxation game, are all the systems and the rules and the dynamics I'm putting in place true to making a relaxing game? Okay, makes sense? Give me a like if you're understanding this and you agree. Are you making a runner game, and what are you trying to make the player feel? Or are you just cloning another runner game and wondering why yours didn't do well but theirs did? Are they tapping into something that you've not thought about? Have you really broken it down to the point where what are you feeling when you're playing that game, and how can I achieve that myself? I've added some aesthetics up there, and I think this is some emotions that are common that we typically want to see our players feel or experience when we're playing a game. So joyous, exhilaration, elation, triumphant, powerful, which we mentioned on Attack Hole. Excuse me, totally couldn't remember them. Euphoria, satisfaction, wonder, intrigue, fascination, and surprise. And this is to eliminate the meh. So what we don't want is like, that's the last thing you want for your game. You want to go all in on achieving, I would say, 1 to 3 of these core aesthetics within your game. And think about how you can make the player feel some of those. Sorry about that, one thing. Squeeze me. All right, so here is what the rub is on this. Do not try and crowbar all of the aesthetics into your game. There's very few games that can deliver on all of those 8 that we looked at today. There are some exceptions. Minecraft, Roblox probably are 2 very good examples where they have the customization, the story, and there's times where in the different modes that those games have, you could be playing a completely different game, satisfying a completely different player all through the single core game. So it's concentrate on 2 or 3 at most, and really nail that, because people who enjoy those types of aesthetics, you are going to really, really satisfy them. It's important not to get lost and try and crowbar so many things in your game that you get lost in what will be the essence or spirit or the overall vision of your game. I think vision's probably the best word there. What are you trying to deliver, and make sure you don't stray too far from the path. Most people are looking for a certain type of game. So for me, I'm going to use myself as the example. I want a chill out game where I can zone out. So I don't want complex systems and leveling up and lots of guns. I don't want to shooting part of the game. I want to go all out on the relaxing mode. You see my point? Don't add things just because this other game has put this in. Oh, I can do a leveling up system, or I can have power ups and stuff like that. Is that relaxing, or do I just want more of the stuff? Right? Peppering several of the core aesthetics is important, however, so it doesn't become boring. There's no reason why on a relaxing game that I get to the end of the level and I feel some satisfaction or some euphoria, or you drip feed me a loose storyline throughout the game. You just don't want to concentrate on adding every single thing to try and hit all the people, because as the old saying goes, you go for trying to please all the people and you end up pleasing nobody, right? The most successful games concentrate on 2 to 3, you'll find, especially on mobile, because I feel that the MDA is kind of somewhat curtailed for mobile, because it's a different audience, and basically, and we don't have the luxury of a lot of the sound aspect, which many titles, I mean, you think of Tales of the Necromancer or something, which is a knockout game on Steam. Whilst there is a mobile version, it's just the different people will play it for very different reasons there, I think, on a mobile phone. And again, just to finalize and really concrete this in, the framework here, and the slides will be available inside the Academy on Monday as always, and you can go back and rewind or whatever. Keep the focus on 2 to 3 of this, and make sure you don't deviate from that path. Get your vision statement for your game and try and keep true to that on at all costs, really, at all costs. Are the mechanics and the systems and the rules you're putting in place, do they hold true to what you want the player to feel? Everybody copies games to get inspiration. It's a great idea. Success leaves clues, but try and understand why these games did well. You know, it comes back to what we mentioned about the clones. Why does an identical game work and some don't? You'll typically find it can be found. The answers can be found within this framework. Play the ones you're copying. How are you feeling? What did they do well? Was it the sense of achievement at the end of the level? Did they make you feel powerful? You know, there's plenty of examples doing my research, and I think one of them, and I'm going to quote Mark Brown here from Game Maker's Toolkit, because he mentioned, or he was in contact with the developers of Aliens, and I'm sure we all know the game Aliens, or you've seen the film, and the developers there had a save point, and they just did a typical save point. So when you every so often it auto saved, and the vision of their game was to make it like super creepy and terrify the hell out of people, right? And what they found is, just because they was so conditioned by all the games that they've ever played before, they just chucked the save point in. But what happened was, as the players went through the game, they realized that if they died, the game would just auto-save for them, and there was no consequence to it. Okay? So when they made it so it didn't auto-save, and you'd have to reach a certain save point, then it changed completely changed the way the player played the game, because now they weren't just running around like they didn't care, right? Because now if they died, it had consequences. And that is a really great example of the way the mechanics influenced the dynamics, which then influenced the aesthetics. Make sense? So because they didn't autosave, they had skin in the game every time, round every corner. And it was even more powerful that when they saw the alien or whatever, it was a total like, oh my God sort of moment. So I think it's really important here that you don't just copy systems from the existing games. You've got to understand why they do it. Another good example here is when you have an FPS and you get unlimited ammo. So when you have unlimited ammo in an FPS, what do you typically do? You just go around guns blazing, right? You spray and pray. And it's a very different experience if you have a reload system or limited ammo. Because if you have limited ammo, you have to approach the game in a very different way. You pick your shots. You don't just like button smash, because it just really changed the dynamics of the game, because now you've got limited ammo and you can't just like spray and pray, like I said. So these kind of things I think is really important to think about, and maybe even use as an influence to change up an existing game. Is there some sort of innovation here you can do on a runner that doesn't take the typical rules and potentially remove some of the mechanics to have a very different slant on things? And to wrap that up, work backwards from the player. What are you trying to achieve? What is your experience are you trying to craft for the player? And how do your dynamics facilitate that? And of course, how do the mechanics influence the dynamics? I hope all that made sense. I will go through some of it. I want to take some of your questions here. I've made actually good time for once, which is kind of amazing for me. But let's just flick back real quick to the main one here. I'm just going to whiz through. Here we go. So I'll leave that on the screen for now. But how can you really identify what sort of games are trying to achieve? One of the other examples I thought of was Shortcut Run by Voodoo and Home Games. What is up to Paul? Amazing game, real big, popular, successful game. But when you played through that game, you picked up, you basically cheated, which was a really powerful and exhilarating experience. Now, Shortcut Run, obviously, because of the name, it wouldn't work if you didn't have it. Otherwise, it would just be a race. But the feeling that they gave the player by cheating, and Aquapark did a very similar thing, where you can fly off the water slide. It really does invoke a different feeling to those games, rather than running over a power up and going slightly faster. Do you get my point? Has anyone got a game that we can have a think of? I'm just going to flick back. So I hope that was helpful. Give me a like if you like this sort of stuff. We can go back and do more of these things. Really interesting to hear your thoughts on this. And of course, we can continue discussion over on the Discord. I'm just going to catch up on the chat here. Ori and the Blind Forest, Hitman Go, Monument Valley. Yeah. So Monument Valley is a great example of that. Is really aesthetically pleasing. A lot of people are drawn to that game because of the sensation, right? So that comes back to the visuals and the sound too a little bit. And I think, did you say Monument Valley in there, or did I just make that up? Where did that thing go? I did just make that up. So Monument Valley as well for me. Obviously a snowboarding game. If you don't know that game, go and look that up. But that was a real sensation on the visuals for me. I was drawn to that because of the visuals. Ori and the Blind Forest, obviously another platformer. Borrowed all sorts of mechanics from other games, but beautifully stunning game, and of course attracted a lot of people through that, and of course the soundtrack as well. Hitman Go, Monument Valley. Do you think, Chris, let's have a look. Let me just do this real quick so I can get my brain in gear. Let's just do this. One sec. All right, maybe I won't. How weird. Chris says, do you think that games that have everything in there didn't start that way in CPI testing? Do you think they made them fuller after good CPI? That's a great question, Chris. I really want to see if I can do this. Oh, I know why I can't do that. Okay. That's because I'm a potato, obviously. Right, so Chris asks here. Oh boy. Where did that come from? Chris asks here, do you think that games have everything in them? Didn't start that way in CPI testing. I think there's very few games with everything in them, Chris. But I think I get where you're coming from. Certainly, as games evolve and go through the various iterations, they will be built upon and refined, and more things are added. So that's even more of a case point for essentially concentrating on 2 or 3 core feelings that you're trying to evoke in your games. So I definitely think they didn't start that way. They would have made them fuller. But I think that there's. I don't want you to get confused here about features and modes and stuff like that. That isn't the point of today's talk. This framework really wants to break down fun within the game and how you direct your mechanics and the things that happen in your game to create that type of fun and to identify the fun you're trying to create. Oh, it gets quite complicated, right? But I hope that makes sense. So, like I said, if we're going for a shooter, an FPS, are we trying to have unlimited ammo with pretty heavy guns to do a button smash, spray and pray? Or are we doing a sniper game, which is also an FPS game, but has a very different feeling than a spray and pray? Does that make sense? So if we have, are we trying to be powerful, sneaky, precise? What is it that you're trying to achieve with the thing you're building, and how are the players going to feel when they pull it off, right? You can please some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. That was the quote I butchered earlier, I think, Chris. So I appreciate you doing that. That is the quote that I really did butcher earlier. But yeah, that's right. And I think this is super important, and you'll see why some games stick around and some games don't. Now, I'm just going to pull it up actually. In my post that I did on the LinkedIn group, come and join me over there. I listed all the games, the releases. Actually, I'll just flick back over so you can see it. Might be a little bit more helpful. So I broke down the top 100 from this week or last week, the last few days, right, of the game releases in the top 100. And I think this is what kind of inspired me to do this, because if we look, 30% of the games were released this year in the top 100. And of course, this is fluid and it moves around a lot. But overall, over 51% are more than 3 years old. And that is a testament of how well those games have stuck around. Make sense? So we've got games there from 2009, and I thought I put it on here, but I'm not sure I did. But all the games have been updated in the last 7 months, apart from Geometry Dash, which brought me back over here, is the fact that Geometry Dash is very sensual, sensation. What do they call that thing? Sensation, yeah, very sensation, right? Obviously, it's the audio and the visuals on Geometry Dash is very striking, but it's really like that fast pace. It doesn't try and be anything other than what it is. And I think that's super important, and probably why it's done so well, because it doesn't pretend to do anything that it's not. There's no leveling up in Geometry Dash. You can change your skins, sure, but it's all the same, just different challenges. All the same mechanics. Of course, they're layered and there's different variations on it, but I think that's actually quite a good example of how it is really appeals to that type of audience, and that is not a game that you would chill to. Make sense? How we doing? Any more questions today? Thanks for sticking with me if you've got this far. Appreciate it. Play Dead, Inside, and Limbo, the most atmospheric games I've played. Yeah, exactly. Great examples there. I think we should take Limbo because that one obviously has the sensation of the black and white and very striking on the visuals. Music is a huge part of that game, but you run all the time. The player, if I'm not mistaken, has only one speed. So what would happen there if you could just run really fast? If you could change the player speed, which is the mechanic, that would directly influence the dynamics of that game. If you could run faster or you could jump higher. If you change these one things, they can have a drastic effect on the game. So yeah, Limbo and Inside. Wow, great games, great examples. All right. So I hope that was interesting today. We can continue way more when we get over on the Discord if you want to do so. I will put the slides up for you. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting today. So I really want to impress upon you to make sure that you're really thinking about. I'd love to someone to tell me if they're building some type of game here, just a genre or a type of game. That would be super helpful. Oh, Bad North as well. Auto's Adventure. Yeah, now, that's what I meant. I said Monument Valley, didn't I? I meant Auto's Adventure or Auto's Odyssey when I was talking about the visuals of the snowboarding game. Well done, Top Arcade. Yeah, I totally got that muddled up. That's what I was thinking of. No, wait, what? Monument Valley was the first one, wasn't it? Oh, there's so many games. I'm getting so muddled in my head here. Pretty sure that's right, though. Yeah, okay. Webmaster, Stickman Hero. Yeah. So Webmaster, Stickman Hero, haptics, camera zoom, voiceovers. Yeah. Massive experience. All right, here's a question. How to set aesthetics and understand your target audience better from watching other... How to set your aesthetics and understand your target audience better from watching other PC console games. I think there's a lot you can take away from PC and console here. I think it translates very different. I think it's difficult to translate it for the most part. And I think I might do a stream on looking at Steam and stuff. There is a video inside the Academy. So if you're not inside the Academy, come and join us in there. I've done how I research Steam. But there's definitely there's cues to be had, but I think the best way to go from PC and console, and this is not specific to this topic here, Udal, so apologies for going a little bit off topic, but I think you're looking for vertical slices when we're looking at PC console. You want to take a slice of that game and see what you end up with in essence, and I think I don't think you want to set the aesthetic and your target audience that way around. I think you should. Can someone give me a game that we can just try and get? Oh, here we go. All right, let's take this as an example then. Okay, we've got a little bit of time here. Udal's designing a survival builder game, and you're not sure you've got the genre correctly worded. I don't think you need to worry about any type of pigeonholing any type of game. So let's ignore that bit. But you're doing a survival builder game. Okay, so in the chat, while I take a quick slurp because I'm needing a drink, what do you think the feelings that Udall should be concentrating on a survival builder? I'd love to know if you guys have got any... What would you want to feel when you're playing one of those types of games? because this is where the success of your game will lie. I'm almost convinced of it. Or you tell me, that might be a good start. What are you trying to achieve for the player? And what mechanics are you going to introduce to create dynamics to invoke that aesthetic? That's such a difficult way to put it in my brain. What are you going to code? What actions are the players going to do to invoke a feeling? How are they going to feel? So code to action to feeling, right? Right, so this is great. So Chris is saying tension and threat. Top Arcade is saying scary and spooky. Okay. So I would put struggle in there. I would put fear. Anxiety says, I'm not even going to say your name today. I'm having Friday off. Anxiety, creative satisfaction, yeah, for that. Resource management, yeah. So what would that be? That would be more, there's the resource, ration your supplies. I can't think of the feeling that would be. That would be a mechanic inside it. But this is the point here, Chris. So the resource management, how is it going to feel by doing that? What's the feeling that has for the player? Why would they enjoy that? So it would be struggle. I love anxiety and creative satisfaction. Tension and threat is also great. I'm not sure about spooky, scary, and scary definitely. Fear, struggle. Udall's come back. So this is what Udall's saying here. Explore, collect, build, upgrade, fight back. Right, so you got 5 aspects there of the mechanics, but what's the overarching feeling of the player? Are they going to explore? Is it an exploration game? Is it a discovery game? You know, we want to make sure that we're nailing 2 or 3 of these really, really well, and we can sprinkle. Like, do we need fighting? Is it a fighting game? I think Jilly will understand this one, because how many building games are out there that have a fighting aspect? They always put fighting in building games. And I'm not into fighting. I want to be a builder. And I bail a lot of the time from building games because they put fighting in it. So it's a very different player that I want to that wants to relax with a builder game than wants to play Clash of Clans, which is fundamentally a building game, right? But it is Clash of Clans, so Clans is a real core part of it. I hope this is making sense here. So the building and collecting and exploring, I would put upgrading in the same sort of. They're not really. That's more mechanics rather than feeling. So when I play your survival, so what was it called? So this is why I want to thrash this out here as an exercise, as a real world exercise for you. I have lost your. Right, so you are doing a survival builder. So there's plenty of survival builders. I kind of like survival builders, right? But what you mention here are more mechanics rather than feelings. So here we go. So now you're doing this. You want to make them feel alert, to feel fear, to feel adrenaline, growth, satisfaction, and wanderlust. So this is where you need to ensure your mechanics are going to deliver on that. What is it in your game that's going to make them fearful? What systems are you going to put in place? Are you going to ration them to a particular thing, or how are you going to build these systems in? And this is why it's important to get these feelings to influence the mechanics that you're and the systems and the rules you're going to put in place. Do you see how this is helpful? Because you've mentioned all these things, and I really hope you don't overscope your project here, by the way. But you want to really what was the I can't remember the name of it. There was a really brutal survival game. Was it Deep Forest or something? I can't quite remember the name. But there was one really renowned for being like super brutal. I can't recall the name of it on Steam, but they really leaned into it being like hyper realistic, and there wasn't much exploration. You didn't get too far away from your little mini camp. You had to spend a lot of the time not getting sick and building your base, and it was really more to do with like you didn't go out wandering too far because it was too risky, right? So this is what I want to pull back. So they had fear in there by straying too far out, even though they wanted to feel like they're exploring. They didn't explore too much because they needed to stay close to their base camp. Is this making sense? Please, someone give me a like if this is making sense, because I think it's really important that we get this, and we're going to go over this again at some point. There we go, Chris. That's kind of that. Blood Trail says maybe. No, it wasn't. It wasn't, Colette. Thanks for that. It wasn't a Fallout game. It was. I really want to Google it right now, but I won't. It was called. I'm gonna have to Google it. You're just gonna have to go and leave me a comment to remind me. It was called. I'm sure it's not the Forest. It's going to come to me as soon as I take it off. It was a Green Hell. Is that a game? Can someone Google Green Hell or something? It might have been Green Hell. Anyway, the point is that they really dialed in on the fear on that, and it was very successful because they only chose 2 or 3 of the aesthetics to separate them apart from all the other survival games, of which there are Green Hell. I'm sure it was Green Hell. Anyway, they did really well because that was their vision for their game. Don't Starve. No, it wasn't. What is up, Goran? No, it wasn't Don't Starve. I'm sure it was Green Hell. I'm going to Google it because I can, and it's Friday and it's the end of the stream. I'm sure it was Green Hell. It was Green Hell. Check my bad self out. Let's do a... I will put a video of it in just a moment. But yeah, so it really was successful because they concentrated on that audience and the type of aesthetics they were going for, right? And I think this is important because we can take this into your games and like phases as well from Billbox years ago, or Trey Smith really went on to was being super difficult, right? That really leaned into that sort of the fact that it was super brutal, and there's plenty of them. So this is Green Hell, a really cool survival game on Steam. Really brutally hard, not for the faint. This is like a die-hard survival game, right? But they did so well because you don't stray, certainly initially, too far away from the base camp here at the early stages. So yeah, check this one out if you're a fan of the survival games. But this one did really, really well because it stuck to its core. So yeah, I did get there in the end. It was Green Hell. So there we go. Check my bad self out. I've got to stop that video because that's so confusing for me. So yeah, I hope you found that useful today. I really would love it if you thought about this sort of stuff to take action on the games you're building. I think it's really important. So especially Udall. I'm just trying to get this one here, especially for this. If you're building a game right now, which I hope you are, what are you trying to achieve with this, and how is the player going to feel? What's going to separate your game apart? Why are they going to? What do you want your players to feel? Survival builder. I had some great suggestions from the chat here. Fear. It's so hard to manage these comments. Tension and threat. That's a really good one. How are you going to build these systems to facilitate these emotions? All right, guys, that's going to go and wrap it up for me today. Hope you found that useful. I think this one's a really smart one. I think we've done it sort of infinitum there for today. I'm way over now, of course, so I am going to go and wrap it up. Check out the MDA Framework. I'll post it up on Monday. But this really will make you a better designer. I absolutely promise you. Stay true to the vision of your game. What are you trying to achieve? And in the games that you're inspired by, how are you feeling? And what mechanics and dynamics cause that feeling? Someone just said it. How many times are we near? Where was that? I just saw it at the end there. Someone said, how many times do we just... Here, Chris smashes it. I'm going to leave it on this today because I think this is really good. How many times do we say, ooh, that was close, and then smile? So that is a dynamic in the game as a result of the mechanics that you've coded that has created a emotional reaction that made you smile. And I think that's great, Chris. That is what we're trying to look for. If we want to make it fun, then we need to make dynamics that will cause that fun. All right? That's it. For me, for now, for this week, we'll be back. We won't be back next week, but we will be back the following week when I'll have some more Academy goodness for you. As always, hit the like on the way out. Lets me know you enjoyed this stream. And with all that said and done, that is going to go and wrap it up for me for now. I will see you soon, guys. Come and join me on LinkedIn and the Discord. And if you want to test your games, Homer Lab is where you want to test them. All right. See ya.